introduce from Sherrington to you. I think we'd best start, if you'd like to get lunch today, we'd better get started.
I guess we're just going to say smile. Hey, I can work out later who everybody is. Okay, well, thank you for coming to the session. It's interesting hearing Prof Co, those of you who follow Prof Co, Rob talking earlier, it's fantastic talking about the evidence base for CPD. And basically how, you know, a lot of what we do in schools is rubbish, isn't it? I mean, we're guessing in a giant way. And you know, hopefully by the end of this, I'm trying to give you a flavour of what happens in my school, where we're trying to create what we call a research-engaged learning community. And I'm not saying we've got all the answers, not by a long way, but we're trying to constantly evolve this culture in my school where we're trying to solve the problem of how to do this well. So I'm going to start, first of all, with Northern Rocks. Somebody had actually asked me what's it got to do with you, so these are my Northern credentials. 1983, Manchester University, I look like this. I used to get my hair cut in a special place, we used to have this sort of pot of gel which we called hair dirty, so to keep your hair up. That was quite an effort. But also, I was in, this was one of my prized possessions. I was in a band called That Ted. Read that headline. This is for the university. We split up about 2 weeks later. And there was an interview with the other guys in the band, and the reason I wasn't there is because I was doing my teaching practice. And I was in a school in South Manchester, in Wythenshawe, doing my teaching practice, learning from people who are some of the most jaded people I've ever come across. A chemistry teacher told me, said, "What are you doing here? I haven't had a holiday for 5 years. The behaviour was really tough." But you know, we decided that we wanted to do proper careers and not trying to pretend to be musicians. But you know, if you want to check out some of the songs, they weren't that bad. And look what happened to those guys anyway. You know, whatever happened to them. Then I got my first job was in Wigan. And the reason that's good is because in my interviews with my job, I taught physics and maths A-level. They said, "Okay, you can do physics. What else would you do? What else can you offer?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" They said, "Well, we have on the curriculum, every teacher has a lesson or two a week where you teach something you want to the sixth form. What would you do?" And I said, "Well, I've been in a band. I could do stuff to do with organising bands and recording them and so on." So I did it. It was on my timetable to teach studio recording. And some of the students I worked with were the guys that later became the verb. This is my great sort of claim to fame. So close. Yes. I'm not going to play it now because I don't want the tech to go all wrong, but that song there, which is on SoundCloud, it's on the documentary, which I recorded when they were Richard Ashcroft was 17. I've put it on SoundCloud. It's had several thousand plays because from all the Richard Ashcroft fans out there. But to me, I thought that was worth including because my first experience of teaching was that part and parcel of your working week was to do something that you just really wanted to do. That was just normal. That was 1987, and that was before the national curriculum came out and so on. And, you know, things slowly have changed. But that spirit, to me, I never thought of teaching as being something where I've never felt that I'm being told what to do. I've never felt that. And, you know, it came from having that opportunity where you would go off and do stuff. So, now, before we talk about CPD, we've got to have a sense of what we're looking for. And I think that, you know, I don't want to take too long on this bit, but I've written a blog. One of the first blogs I ever wrote, decided to do blogging, was what makes a great teacher, and there are a number of different features. And these were three of the things. I won't read them all out, but essentially, recently I've tried to pare it down to even a subset of the original material. And for me, this is this sense of rigour and sort of urgency and drive. I've often used that in a school. A sense of drive. It's kind of, you've got to get on with it. You know, really good teachers are not just laid back in a sense that they just take what comes. They're pushing, and I think that's really a key feature. Behaviour is strong. You know, a teacher who's a great teacher has that sorted out in all sorts of different ways, but they're on top of their classes, and they use the systems in their schools well, but they use them intelligently, and they have a kind of personal presence which we have to develop over time. And then they have this ability to explain things, which, you know, sometimes people see as some kind of knack that you just have, but then you can learn to explain better, and you know, you explain better the second time you explain things and so on. You ask good questions, you give good feedback. And the last line, you give, and if I ask my daughter this question about her teachers, that's one of the things she says. You know, so-and-so's a good teacher because you know how well you're doing and how... And it's not about the books being marked either, it's about the interaction with you in that sense of, yeah, well done, you're going well, this is where to go next. It's a constant communication that teachers have. And that sense of giving the learners confidence. They're in the hands of someone who knows them, knows their learning, is in control, and that can be fueled by expert knowledge and various things. So these things are, you know, an attempt to grasp at what makes great teaching, and I think we need to sort of be sharing that, communicating that. This is another attempt. I wrote this set of blogs last year where I was trying to say, well, what makes great lessons? And you know, this is just my attempt. There are hundreds of different ways of dicing this up, and I was trying to get a sense of all the different things you need to be thinking about, and there are lots of different things. Towards the bottom, you get some of the more, what might people think are softer edge things with, you know, expressing that awe for learning. Wow, this is absolutely fantastic. Rather than just mechanically explaining something, you also, at the same time, say, but isn't that also incredible? Before we slice this poem to pieces, let's just enjoy it for its beauty and for what it is. And you convey that excitement, as well as then slicing it to pieces and explaining why it works. It's not one or the other. And having a joy for your own learning. And that blog post is just video clips of people talking about their passions and showing fun stuff. But it's also got rigour in there, probing questions, challenge. You know, and actually, often when I see weak teaching, it's the lack of challenge. It's too weak. It's not probing enough. It's not rigorous enough. And that's a sense that you've got. But these are all value judgments. So we need to be communicating that as a sort of starting point. And the most recent way I've been talking about this is another sort of whole talk, and a whole concept, is this the whole discussion about progressive and traditional teaching methods. And for me, I'm trying to work on this way of expressing this myself, where I talk about it as like an organic, symbiotic relationship between these two supposed poles, where you've got the sort of traditional structure and opportunities to, the need to directly explain and instruct, at the same time as creating this kind of soul food, this kind of nourishing cultural environment in your classroom, where you are encouraging the love of learning and all those things. And in the talk before, this idea that you kind of get engagement before learning, where in fact really you get the engagement through the learning, or as a consequence of it. These things are constantly in flux when you're dealing with different learners, different situations. And I think we should be having discussions in schools about our sort of principles, so that when we are then looking at what we need to learn to do it better, we have a shared understanding. But I do think, and I think this has been said lots of times, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the whole Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy story of the... You can shout out if you know the names of the characters. Well, who are they? I'm just going to look up ready. They're called I should know this, but I don't. The governments and the lordments or something. There's this fleet of people who they argued for millennia because of a mistake. And when they realised that they'd been by mistake, they gathered together and they travelled for thousands of years to find Earth. And when they got there, due to a terrible miscalculation of scale, the whole fleet was swallowed by a dog. And I use this analogy all the time, so I think in education sometimes we get the scale wrong. We're talking about, you know, these debates about progressive and traditional teaching, or particular teaching methods, or even people getting really upset about thinking hats or something, which is absolutely trivial in the grand scheme of improving a school. I mean, you can have all of your teachers or even a couple, whatever, just using something lame or stupid. But actually doesn't really matter that much in the grand scheme of things, because the basics like behaviour and getting the kids to work hard and those sorts of things have far, far greater effect. And actually, the subtle way that you may be doing your, pause, bounce, questioning, whatever, is just at a level where you can only really be making a difference with that if you've got those other things really strongly embedded already. So we need to be really careful that we're not sort of losing the big picture of what the simple things that you can get right are. So, in sort of developing a research engaged learning community, I think it's important to think about two things, systems and culture. And you can't have that one, there's no point just having one system if the culture is rubbish. And you can't just talk about this nebulous sense of culture without a system. You need both. You need a process. You need timetabled meetings. You need a time in the week or the calendar when the things are going to happen. And you need to have a follow-on from a CPD to see what's going to happen next. You have to have systems which tell you whether things work or not. But none of that really works on its own unless there's also this cultural atmosphere, which is what people experience in between all the system moments. So the little conversations in the staff room, the little micro details of your working week as a teacher, that's where culture matters. To the point where sometimes the systems stop mattering because you've already got the culture, but these go hand in hand. And some of the things I think we do, some of the words we use, the symbols we use, some of the activities we do are actually, I've thought about this in preparing for this, probably don't actually make any difference in impact in terms of something you can measure, but they're there because of the cultural impact, and that's why we do them. So, I think the reason I used that thing before, that tree metaphor, because I think organic metaphors are really, really powerful for talking about schools because they're so dynamic and changing. And I've written a thing before about creating the conditions for great teachers to thrive. This idea of conditions meaning this with the environment that we're in. And these are 6 things that I came up with where people will thrive if they feel there's a